After the crushing low of disqualification in Austin, Mercedes surely thought their worst weekend of the season was behind them. In Sao Paulo, they found out how wrong they were, as the sprint race proved their undoing again. The new floor in Austin was hailed as a huge upgrade and an indicator their development was succeeding, but clearly, it's failed. The team needs to start building toward next year, but what is there to build upon? Today, we'll cover Mercedes' awful weekend in Brazil, the reasons why it happened, and why it could be catastrophic to next season as well. So don't go anywhere. There was loads to love about the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, unless you are a Mercedes fan, of course. Saturday's sessions proved that with good track selection, sprint races are an excellent watch. Who knew that racing drivers just love to race sometimes, eh? Aston Martin were back on form, nailing their setup for the weekend and securing big points. Credit has to be given to Lance Stroll, whose 5th place finish was his best since Australia at the start of April. Unfortunately, they'll need a miracle to overtake McLaren in 4th in the constructors' standings with just 2 races left. Speaking of McLaren, Lando Norris once again exhibited the incredible pace that is making his team favourites to challenge Red Bull next year. Then there was Mercedes. The team, who probably saw themselves as favourites to fight Max next season after their floor upgrade in Austin. The track at Sao Paulo exposed the one crippling weakness that has contributed more to their struggles this season than anything else. But I'll talk about that in a bit. First, let's talk about just how bad a weekend this was for them. We need to start with a look at last season. Mercedes finished 1st and 2nd in the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. They had the fastest lap as well. In the sprint, they finished 1st and 3rd, meaning they only missed out on 1 point all weekend. Hamilton had a magic time last year, going through the entire pack to finish 2nd. Russell won his first ever race and the team won their first of the season. To date, still their only win in the ground effect era. The hype for 2023 after that race was at an all-time high. Merc had developed hard late into the season, which gave them an advantage in terms of investment into the car at that point in the season. Still, they had won a race, they'd made progress, and with a winter to take everything they'd learned and apply it to the new car, everyone thought they would be pushing Red Bull for race wins this year. Instead, this season was the complete opposite, and perhaps the juxtaposition of the 2 races is the perfect metaphor for Mercedes in the ground effect era. Same circuit, similar technical rules, late season developments appearing successful, plenty of similarities, but completely different results. Mercedes' Sao Paulo Grand Prix was their worst weekend in 13 years, said team principal Toto Wolff after the race. Probably a fair assessment, with Lewis Hamilton finishing 8th after an uncompetitive race, while teammate George Russell retired from 11th because his engine was about to fail. Wolff said Mercedes' lack of pace was baffling and unacceptable. "We will have a fundamentally different car next year, and this confirms that this is the right thing to do," Wolff said. Those miserable performances came after Mercedes introduced a new floor, which they believed had provided a good step forward in performance. "We are a proper structure, a solid team, and that didn't look like a solid team today," Wolff said. Interestingly, within 3 consecutive races, you're finishing a strong 2nd in 2 and challenging Max, and then a week later, you're nowhere. And I believe this is just not on. This car, the development has been more plaster as we put on something not right, and it shows that it is so unpredictable that it can swing either side. His remark is a reference to his belief that the current Mercedes is a fundamentally flawed concept, with so many major issues that require a whole new car to rectify them. Though that is a contrast to the sentiment from Toto after Austin and Mexico. He said the new floor confirmed that Mercedes were developing in the right direction. How can they both be moving in the right direction and putting plasters on something fundamentally broken? This is the root of Mercedes' problems in the current technical regulations. They don't have a fundamental understanding of how the regulations are meant to work. It's like trying to climb a mountain with a blindfold on. You can feel you're walking in the right direction because you're going uphill, but you never know if the next step will continue in that direction or if it will take you back down the hill. They're bringing upgrades, and sometimes they work, but they aren't ever sure if they'll work or not. The same is true of setups. Given time to tinker, they can do a good job, but on sprint weekends, when the time is short and the pressure is on, the team can't get it right. In Austin, they ended up running the car far too low to the ground, inflating their performance, but getting one of the cars disqualified. In Sao Paulo, they made the same mistake but at the other end of the spectrum. The team raised their ride height too much and tried to compromise with a massive rear wing compared to everyone else. You can see the theory behind the choices. They didn't want to risk disqualification again in Sao Paulo, an understandable fear. So, to remove the risk of that happening, they raised the car's ride height to limit how much the plank would wear during the race. This reduced the efficiency of the Venturi effect from the floor and allowed more air to escape the floor via the floor edges. These two factors happening together meant the car was producing far less downforce. The team tried to counteract the loss of downforce from the floor by strapping on a massive rear wing, which is the easiest way to ramp up the downforce of an F1 car. The problem with a massive rear wing to solve downforce issues is that it also creates a huge amount of drag. Mercedes were using a hammer to try and fit a screw. Sure, it works, but it's far from the best way of doing it. What they were left with was a car that did not have enough downforce to stop it sliding, causing the tyres to wear incredibly quickly. But with the massive rear wing, they also had loads of drag, meaning they couldn't battle anyone on the straights. You don't win F1 races by being slow on the straights and slow through the corners. After the Austin Grand Prix, Toto Wolff made an excuse for Mercedes having some of the slowest pit stops on the grid. He said he preferred his team to avoid a really slow stop rather than taking a risk for a really fast stop. You don't win F1 races by not taking risks. That play-it-safe mentality caused Mercedes to set their ride height so high they were uncompetitive in Brazil. And this comes back to Mercedes' lack of understanding of their own car. If they knew how their car worked, what causes it to behave in certain ways, they would have known they could have set their ride height lower, allowing them to run less rear wing, and ultimately having a much more competitive weekend. Mercedes didn't know how their car was going to behave, so they played it safe and suffered the consequences. Hamilton summed it up after the race. "My guess is that the floor is not working," he said. A complete opposite to his comments after the last two races, where he said it was the first time he felt he really understood the car. "The floor is not sucking it down, so that pushed us to go to a higher wing. And then we're just massively draggy on the straights. And we're losing so much time on the straights, there's nothing I can do about it. And then we're just sliding through the corners. So we have to look into why that is the case on this rough circuit." Summing up his afternoon, he said, "Just the tyres are overheating, slow on the straights, no grip in the corners." Toto even admitted to the mistake, saying, "We ran the car way too high and you carry that on." This isn't a mistake that is made by a top team that understands their car. The technical team will be looking to next season now, but after this performance in Brazil, they can't have high hopes. They've shown yet again that they don't have a grasp of how the ground effect cars work as a whole package. How can they develop positively when they don't fully understand what they're trying to develop? Hamilton's comments after the race perfectly sums up the situation at Mercedes at the moment. He all but wrote off his chances of challenging for a record 8th World Championship for the next 2 years, following Mercedes' inexcusable performance this weekend. Asked if he'd be able to challenge Verstappen before his current deal with Mercedes runs out, Hamilton, who turns 39 in January, said, "All I can do is try to remain optimistic. But the Red Bull is so far away. They're probably going to be very clear for the next couple of years." Do you agree with Hamilton? Are Red Bull going to be very clear for the next couple of years? Or can a team who seem to understand the current regulations, like McLaren, mount a championship challenge next season? Let me know your thoughts on Mercedes' weekend in the comments down below. And if you want more F1 analysis and news like this, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.